Port Said could be a global hub at the crossroads of global trade, a rich, vibrant city that receives the world at its ports, built around the 19th century origins and survived many bombardments. But it is a stalled city, a city that now looks at the canal from behind a black and gold metal fence. Constructed in 1859 as the northern gate of the Suez Canal, it wasn't founded, it was imposed. A maritime service station for empire, a portal, not a place. The city was carved out of desert and dredged from water, then dressed in the borrowed costumes of Europe. Swiss engineers built chalets to remind them of the Alps. French administrators imported the wooden wraparound galleries they used in New Orleans. Italian traders raised arcades with Venetian symmetry. These weren't cultural gestures. They were acts of dislocation, architecture transplanted from there to here, in denial of the here. But the most honest structure may be the recently erected fence. It is decorative, scalloped, gilded, even charming, but it is not benign. It was built to separate. Beautification is the official reason, security is the real motive, an architecture of separation, of stalling. The city at the crossroads of global trade, then and now, is disconnected. It has no university, a poorly managed train link to Cairo. It is visible from the canal, but peripheral to the country. It floats in logistical space, vital to global trade, irrelevant to national life. Port Said is not just a port, it is architecture in exile, a city built on dislocation. Port Said was built for a canal, but soon it carried more than cargo. In the 1860s, British engineers laid the first telegraph cable through Egypt, connecting London to Bombay via Suez. A message that once took weeks could now travel in minutes, and with it came a new architecture: cable stations, repeater huts, fortified compounds, built for speed, built for secrecy, built for empire. Today, Egypt is still a conduit, but the messages have changed. Over 15 international internet cables now pass through the country, linking Europe to Asia and East Africa. They land in places like Ras Gharib, Zafarana, and Abu Talat before routing into data centers in Cairo and Alexandria, then out to Marseille, Mumbai, Singapore. The geography is the same, but the buildings have changed. In Marseille, the MRS-1 data center receives dozens of undersea cables, including the 2 Africa system, part funded by Meta. The building is fortified, windowless, inside, modular server halls, biometric locks, constant climate control. Outside, no sign, no plaque, no acknowledgement of what passes through. This is what global connection looks like now. Concrete shells routing the world, indifferent to where they stand. Elsewhere, in Frankfurt, the DECIX exchange is one of the busiest internet nodes on the planet. Its architecture is equally mute, designed for latency, not legacy. Packets move, people don't. These are not public buildings. They are architectures of throughput, silent, fortified, precise. They appear neutral, but they shape what connects and what doesn't. And like Port Said, they are not built for where they are built for elsewhere. Sometimes what's removed is the building itself, not destroyed, taken, lifted from its land, boxed up, and rebuilt under a different sky. In Berlin, the Pergamon altar sits at the heart of a museum that bears its name. It was excavated from present-day Turkey in the late 19th century, shipped north in fragments, and reassembled under a skylight in the capital of a different empire. It looks preserved, but it isn't whole. The altar is here, its ground is not. In Madrid, the Temple of Debod stands in a park, beside a traffic circle. Once, it overlooked the Nile. Now it overlooks a reflecting pool. It was gifted by Egypt to Spain in 1968 in exchange for international help saving other ancient sites from the flooding of Lake Nasser. It remains standing, but stripped of orientation, climate, cosmology, a monument out of place. Even Abu Simbel, often praised as a UNESCO triumph, was cut into over 1,000 pieces and moved 65 meters higher and 200 meters inland to escape the rising water of the Aswan High Dam. The temples were preserved, but the sun, which once aligned precisely with the sanctuary twice a year, had to be realigned by engineers. The effect was reconstructed. The meaning, less so. This isn't preservation, it's relocation. Architecture removed from the world that made it. When a building is moved, something else is always left behind. Its relationship to land, light, and life, erased. What arrives is a display. What's missing is the ground it stood on. While some architecture is moved from here to there and placed on pedestals, some is built or repurposed to disappear people. In Buenos Aires, a shuttered garage served as a clandestine detention site during Operation Condor, the US-backed repression campaign in Latin America in the 1970s and 80s. Insulated walls, hidden cells, engineered silence. Architecture designed not to detain, but to erase. In the US, ICE detention centers operate in warehouses and private compounds. In Adelanto, California, a facility run by the GEO Group holds thousands behind sensor grids and sealed corridors. In Dilley, Texas, a 50-acre family center mimics a campus, but functions as a site of indefinite waiting. In Tapachula, Mexico, the Estación Migratoria Siglo XXI detains thousands behind concrete and razor wire. Formerly temporary, many are held for months. The site is funded in part through US-Mexico enforcement deals. In Libya, the EU-funded Libyan Coast Guard returns migrants to militia-run camps in Zintan and Sabha. Architecture, concrete blocks, container housing, guard towers, no legal access, no accountability. Still mapped, funded, sustained. In Greece, the Samos Closed Controlled Access Center opened in 2021 with biometric gates, surveillance towers, and perimeter fencing, funded by the EU, described as humanitarian, built for containment. And now, new detention facilities are underway in El Salvador, part of US efforts to externalize asylum. Few images exist, but the architecture is predictable. Concrete, perimeter, delay. These are not temporary measures. They are systems, rendered spatially. Here is where you're held. There is where you're refused. Between them, architecture that makes refusal feel procedural. Disappearance has been outsourced. And like every system of control, it leaves behind buildings, sometimes hidden, sometimes franchised, sometimes staged. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, national exhibitions have offered countries the chance to display themselves elsewhere, not as they are, but as they want to appear, visible, modern, intact, benevolent. At the 1939 New York World's Fair, the theme was the world of tomorrow. Visitors moved between the Trilon and Perisphere, entered model kitchens, and rode through General Motors' Futurama, a vision of highways and infinite suburbia. The Soviet pavilion showed industrial progress. The US pavilion showcased democracy as polished form. World War II was months away. None of it appeared in the displays. At the 1958 Brussels Expo, Europe's optimism turned outward. Belgium built a Congolese village. Real people were placed behind ropes, part of the colonial exhibit. Nearby, the Philips Pavilion, designed by Le Corbusier and Yanis Xenakis, merged sound, film, and form into an immersive media spectacle. This was modernism as performance. The contradictions were built into the site. Today, the same logic continues. The 2025 Venice Architecture Biennale. The British Pavilion invites visitors to reflect on imperial legacies. It features reclaimed bricks from Kenya, installations about fracture and repair. Meanwhile, RAF surveillance planes operate above Gaza in support of Israeli airstrikes. The critique remains architectural. The complicity remains operational. The U.S. Pavilion is titled Porch, an architecture of invitation. It reflects on the porch as a democratic threshold. The U.S. continues to fund deportation centers and externalize borders across Latin America, Africa, and the Mediterranean. If one ever existed, no porch survived American explosives dropped from the sky in Khan Yunis or elsewhere in Gaza. The Israeli pavilion, despite calls for boycott from Palestinian architects and international allies, remains open. Its theme, life object. No mention of the destruction of life underway. No architecture is neutral. Some simply depends on silence. Venice is not immune. It is part of the system it pretends to reflect on. And like the fairs before it, it offers a temporary here, a curated zone where privileged audience, architects, and visitors alike can gather, display, and perform reflection, while the theirs that finance the spectacle through labor, displacement, and denial remain out of frame. Port Said is a station, a point along a route, built to serve what passes through, not what stays. The same logic repeats itself in Marseille, in Tangier, in Mombasa. Architecture that connects only in one direction. What moves is value. What remains is silence. Temples were moved across continents to preserve their form. People were moved across borders to erase their presence. Both acts made permanent through constructions. Detention sites were built in places no one looks at. Warehouses, converted prisons, fenced compounds, improvised, hidden, unacknowledged. In Venice, nations perform reflection. Britain arranges Kenyan bricks in a pavilion about repair, while aiding bombardment. The US installs a porch and speaks of democracy, while funding detention offshore. Israel exhibits life, while extinguishing it. Architecture is not neutral. It draws the line between what is made visible here and what is kept elsewhere. It makes extraction look like exchange. It turns refusal into form. Here is curated. There is denied. And between them stand the buildings that make this division operational. No spectacle can explain that away, and no pavilion can cover it.